Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
So we're going to dig into our sacred mythology some more this morning because we're in the book of Genesis. So we're continuing with the Jacob narrative. I decided I wanted to look at this as a unit because remember the Parshiot and the chapters and everything being divided is a late thing. Torah is not divided. Torah is just text. I mean, there are divisions between paragraphs, but we put those, other people put those on there. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that this story that we're talking about this week of Yaakov is not separate from the stuff we've been reading. We're the ones who call it a different parsha, but it's not. And it is, but it's all part of the Yaakov narrative. And I decided, I wanted to read this episode that we're going to look at. I wanted to read it in light of what we talked about last week with Yaakov. So if you weren't here last week, listen to that podcast so that this makes a little bit more sense. This can stand on its own. But I want to pick up where we left off with this business with Yaakov, looking at it from both Leon Kass, his way of looking at it, as well as Zornberg. And we started that last time with the two ways that Yaakov is dealing with his own identity, his place in the family, his place as a patriarch, becoming the progenitor of a people, someone who's going to pass on the covenantal relationship. So we started with the two scenes where he takes the blessing and he takes the identity of the firstborn, if you will. Zornberg's going to talk a lot about identity. You can use whatever language you want, but he takes Esav's place. He takes his blessing and he buys his birthright. So in two ways, Jacob kind of manipulates behind the scenes and in interesting ways manipulates to take Esav's position in the family. And Cass and Zornberg both want to make the episode of the wrestling that we're going to look at. They want to say this is the change in Yaakov that makes him truly the patriarch, because this is no longer a Jacob who's manipulating behind the scenes and hiding. He is now, according to Zornberg, confronting a buried part of his identity that he's been dealing with all along. And Cass wants to say this is a transformative moment for Yaakov, who, remember, left Esav 20-something years ago. We're picking up the story 20-something years later. Now he's very successful. He's got 2 wives, 2 concubines, 13 kids. He's very, very successul. So there's a big gap between the stories we had last week and now, not so much in Torah space, but in time and what's happened to Yaakov. So he's now literally the head of a family, the head of a clan. But we're going to see now he's going to take his role as patriarch and passer honor, in the technical term, the passer honor of the covenantal. Okay, this whole business, people, is 10 verses. The whole thing is 10 verses. And then I want us to think a little bit about, because I've been studying this with kids for almost 30 years, because there's always a bar mitzvah or 2 on this Shabbat. And so this year I was just aware, since our last study 2 weeks ago, I've been working with these kids because it's the parsha for this week. So I've been working with these kids on their understanding of this portion. And so I want us to think a little bit, because I asked this of the kids, what does it mean that this is the 10 verses, this episode, this scene, and where it comes from, this name Yisrael? What does it mean that this is the story we tell about the founding of this name we're going to call ourselves, right? Because we're going to call ourselves the descendants of Israel, not the descendants of Abraham, not the descendants of Yosef, not the descendants of Yaakov. We call ourselves the descendants of Israel. All right, so I want to hold all that together. Okay, here we go. So let's look at the text. All right. So this is Yaakov in the night. Yaakov has he's split his clan into two camps because Esav is coming with 400 men. A messenger tells him that Esav is coming with 400 men. Yaakov doesn't know why. He left his brother in a state of his brother ready to kill him. So he has to anticipate the possibility that Esav is coming to make war. And so he divides his family so that if Esav should hit one camp, the other camp will have a chance to get away. So this is that night, before the morning where he's going to meet Esav. Okay? Vayakam b'layla hahu, and he gets up that night. Vayikach et shtei nashav, and he takes his two wives, ve'et shtei shivchotav, and his two concubines, and his 11 sons. It doesn't mention Dinah here, and Binyamin is not born yet. So I lied when I said he had 13. He has 12. After taking them across the stream, he sent across all his possessions. All right. So he sends them across. Vayivater Yaakov levado. I never saw this before. This is why I love this. I never saw some of this until I started reading Cass and Zornberg this week. What didn't I see? Vayivater Yaakov levado. Jacob was left alone. What is the only other reference we have to someone being levad, alone? Only other time we're told someone is alone is in Gan Eden. Adam, Ha'adam, the earthling, is levad. And how do we know that? Because the text tells us, lo tov. It's not good that the Adam is alone. That's the only thing in the Garden of Eden that is lo tov, that is not good. Everything else is tov or tov me'od. So the only problem in Eden, the only thing that's not good, is the earthling being alone. That has to be rectified. That has to be fixed. And that is fixed with what? The creation of whom? Eve, Chava. And what is she created out of? Tsela, right? And we had a discussion about what we think that might mean, but it really means like side. Some people want to say it means a curved side. So that's the bone of the rib cage. We studied one year that it could be the bone of the penis. Because the human doesn't have a baculum, other species of mammals do. And so it's an explanation for why there is no bone in the penis. It's because it was used to create Chava, which kind of makes some sense if you're going to talk about reproduction. Anyway, remember that. He's levad, and that situation is rectified by taking a tsela from him and making Chava, making Eve. Okay, so we now have Yaakov levad. He is alone. Ve'ye'avek ish imo. So we've talked about this before. Ye'avek. You cannot miss that ye'avek sounds like Yaakov. So this figure, this ish, we're told it's an ish, a person, ye'avek, engages Jacob physically. Ad alot hashachar, until the rising of the sun, of the dawn. And when he saw that he couldn't prevail against him, Vayiga b'kaf yerecho. He injures Yaakov in the hip socket and wrenched his hip socket. And here you can't hear in case it wasn't obvious before. He teka'ah. Again, look at the kuf and the ayin, just like in Yaakov. So v'teka'ah kaf yerech Yaakov behe'avko imo. You cannot miss that in the Hebrew. V'teka'ah kaf yerech Yaakov behe'avko. Right? And where are they doing all this? At the Yavok, right? So all of this is a beautiful alliteration in Hebrew. So he wounds him in the thigh. He wrenches his thigh. Who's Yaakov's in his striving with him? Vayomer, and he said, Shalcheni, let me go. Ki Allah hashachar, because the dawn is rising. Vayomer, Lo eshlachecha. No, I won't. And he says to him, meaning Yaakov says to the ish, no, I won't let you go unless, ki'im means unless, ki'im what? Berachtani. You bless me. Okay. So a couple things here, again, that I don't think I really ever thought of before. He's levad, he's alone. And now we're going to have him ye'aveking with the ish. And Cass points out that it has to be this way in some ways because This is an echo of Yaakov's whole life. This is the moment that he is transformed because he steps actively into this wrestling match to finally put to rest the wrestling that started in Rebekah's womb. It has to be a wrestling match, in other words, right? Because that's what was happening. Remember when she goes to get an oracle? Because they are wrestling in her so badly that she's having agony in her pregnancy. So badly that she goes to an oracle who says, right, there's two nations in your womb, and essentially they're striving already with each other. And so I love how Cass says, so of course, if you're going to have a resolution to this at all, it's going to involve some kind of echo of that original existential wrestling that has been happening for Yaakov since before he was born. And of course, it's about Esav coming, right? It's Esav's coming. So it has to be, if we're going to have the denouement, it has to be like this. I love that. I really love that. The symmetry is really actually very poignant and very beautiful. Okay, so he sees that he can't prevail against him. He hurts him in the hip socket and says, let me go. And Yaakov says, no, not until you bless me. So something's going on that this thing that he's contending with notices the dawn breaking, and that's a time that he needs to let him go as he sees the light, the day starting. Cass points out that think about when Esav and Yaakov saw the light of existence, what was happening? Yaakov was hanging on to the ankle of Esav, and Esav's trying to get out of Rebekah, right? And Yaakov's got him by the ankle. That's how he gets the name Yaakov. Well, I never thought about that before. This being is trying to get away from Yaakov as the day is beginning, right? As a new day dawns, as a new day begins, he's trying to get away from Yaakov, just like Esav was. And now Yaakov understands something, that there's something going on that's not a normal wrestling match. He's managed to hang on all night. This being says something about the dawn. Let me go. Somehow Yaakov understands this is not a normal experience and decides I can get a blessing out of this. But what's important for both Zornberg and Cass is that he doesn't manipulate this in terms of like being secret about it. He earned this. He hung on all night, got wrenched in the hip socket and still doesn't let go and demands a blessing. He now steps into, I have earned this. He's earned it by 22 years of siring children and raising them and being with two sisters who don't get along so well all the time. And right, he becoming successful in business, right? He was in his father-in-law's business. He becomes very successful by sort of tricking his father-in-law, but whatever. And then, so he's grown. And this is the moment he says, I've earned the ways that I am the patriarch of this clan. I demand the blessing from my own ability to struggle and strive and hang on and succeed. I demand finally my blessing. Fair and square. Okay. And he says to him, meaning, and the only way we know who's speaking is by reading backwards. So he says to him, what's your name? And he says, Yaakov. That's how we know who's talking. It's only when we get to Yaakov that we know who's talking. What is your name? He says to him. And he says, Yaakov. All right. What do we know about naming? Naming is a very intimate thing. When you call someone by their name, you are entering into a powerful kind of exchange, right? Names are very important. So for the being to give Yaakov a real bracha, he has to know his identity. He has to know his name. Vayomer, and he says, Lo Yaakov ye'amer od shimcha. Not Yaakov will your name be said anymore. Ki'im, here Ki'im means but, Yisrael, but rather Yisrael. Ki sarita, because you have striven, im Elohim ve'im anashim vetuchal. You have striven with Elohim, that can mean capital E, Elohim, God, or little e, gods, ve'im anashim, and with people, vatuchal, and you have proven yourself able. Okay. What I've never seen, and I've studied this story my whole life, people. I never saw this. No one pointed it out to me. It jumped off the page when I went to Klein to look up Sarita, because I was going to do a whole shiur with y'all on the name Yisrael and what does it really mean and what are all the commentaries on it. So I went to Klein, and what did I see? Holy buckets. Never saw this before. Sarah, he fought, strove, contended. What's meaning number 2? Princess. Noble lady, Sarah. What? How did I never, ever see? Sarah, Sarita, you sarad with gods and people and prevailed. You, Yaakov, get this bracha and become the purveyor of the covenant because you sarad. Oh my gosh. Do you all get what I'm saying? No. Sarah, our matriarch. Turn it into a verb. You sarad. Ki sarita. You sarad. With divine beings and people, and you prevailed. Because you were Sarah-ing. Oh my God. He becomes the patriarch by matriarching. Oh my God. Okay, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but you cannot look at this page and miss Sarah. He fought, he strove, he contended. That's what Torah says. Ki sarita, because you sarad. Well, of course I knew that that's the root of Yisrael, but I didn't think about Sarah. Whoa, okay. So I don't know what to do with this. Somebody's got to write me the essay by next week, but there's something here that I need to figure out. But I have never seen this, and I think that it is incredibly, crazily wonderful that he gets his name. We get our name, Yisrael, because we sarad and continue to sarah with divine forces and human ones, and we prevail. Holy buckets. Okay. Vayishal Yaakov, and Yaakov asks, please tell me your name. Vayomer, and he says, Lama zetish al lishmi. Why is it that you're asking me my name? Vayevarecho tosham, and he blesses him there. Notice we don't get a name. The being's not stupid. The being knows. If the being gives Yaakov a name, that gives Yaakov certain power that he's not prepared to give him. And so he just gives him the blessing. He blesses him. Okay. Vayikra Yaakov Shem HaMakom Pniel, and Yaakov calls the name of the place Pniel, a very odd rendering of something about face and God. Ki ra'iti Elohim panim el panim, for I have seen God face to face, but my soul was saved. Okay. We know a human, because we get told this in Exodus, that a human cannot see God face to face and live. God tells this to Moshe. So here it seems to be something about, but I had an intimate exposure to the divine that didn't kill me. When maybe he's saying it should have. That it was so intimate and powerful, it really should have killed him, but didn't. And that's kind of miraculous, it seems, right? That he's saying that his soul didn't get gone. Okay. Now, here's the other one I did not see until now. The sun rose as he passed Penuel. Now it's called Penuel, whatever. Maybe there are two traditions about what this place is called. Vehu, and he, meaning Yaakov, look at this, people. Look at this. Solea al Yericho. He's limping on his thigh. But what are the letters? I never saw those before. What are the letters for limping? The same 3 letters as tsela, side. Adam is levad. He's alone. What is the fix? Take his tsela and make chava. That's how you answer his aloneness, is you take his tsela and make Eve. Yaakov was alone. How do we address that? What's the big new thing that's going to happen to fix the situation of him being levad? He's now going to have a tsela that he didn't have before. Again, the tsela is going to be something that rectifies the situation. He's going to have a limp. He's wounded forever. And how do we know that that's a big deal? Because this is why Bnei Israel don't eat the thigh muscle on an animal, because Jacob's hip socket was wrenched at the thigh. The rabbinic tradition wants to say, and does say in Midrashim all over the place, he limps the rest of his life. I personally read this story as as a story told with a progenitor who had hip dysplasia. That is what I read now forever, because those of us who have had hip dysplasia know that the pain is in your groin. So, or arthritis in the hip, right? The pain manifests in a limp and in the groin. And so I think this is a story that's written out of the experience of people who have hip problems, right? Because it's terribly painful and you limp. Anyway, that's a side point. But you can imagine this is told about an ancestor who limped the rest of his life, because had I not had hip replacement, I'd be limping the rest of my life. I'd be in a wheelchair. So anyway, so I find that fascinating. But what's important is, I think, is that the tzela here is about woundedness and limping, vulnerability, and that's who we're going to be as a people. We're going to not be the ones to rule the planet, right? This story is about how we get our name, and this story and our name is about who we're going to be in the world, that we're going to limp, that we're going to be vulnerable. Okay, we're gonna talk some more. Okay, but first, I'm gonna see what y'all have to. That's the end of the story, by the way. That's the end of our episode. Okay, Rachel.
Thank you. So do you remember when Zornberg was talking about Jacob and Esau almost being like two sides of one whole?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you were making the connection to Adam and Eve, it made me think that perhaps Jacob, I mean, we've talked about this before, but I mean, Jacob truly he does have to wrestle with himself, because he needs to be merged with his other self. Esau is his other self, his reflection, his mirror, and in so doing, he does not come out unscathed. That is the taking of his side, and that taking of that piece from him represents possibly him having to be merged with that other part of himself. I mean, I know that literally this is a story about two brothers, but if we can for a moment just suspend disbelief, mm-hmm. and say that they are really one person, and he has had to prove himself physically too, because Esau is the one who was the one who could go out and hunt, and he could be physically strong. Jacob has to be able to do that if he is going to leave. I know that he's not that, but he has to be in some way. And so, but he's going to come, but he's not going to, it's not his forte, and he's not going to come out unscathed.
Beautiful. You just reiterated Zornberg beautifully, and she says, of course he's limping.
Maybe I'm remembering, because I think I read that one.
Yeah, but if you're going to confront that shadow side of yourself and really try to attempt integration of the shadow self, of the part of us that we want to avoid, of the part that feels strange to us, then you're going to come out limping. And Cass says the same thing. If you're going to have a real encounter with the divine, like a real encounter, you do not come out of that unscathed, unchanged, right? It's beautiful. And I'll show you, because, okay, don't tell anybody. Y'all can't tell anybody. But I used ChatGPT for the first time in Torah study to see what Zornberg says about this business. And here you go. Here you are, Rachel, what you just said. The wound is a sign of authenticity. You cannot encounter the divine and remain intact. Transformation requires vulnerability, right? But also, it's a dynamic tension between his two identities, which is what you're talking about, right? So Israel, the name change marks a possibility, a capacity to engage God, others, and himself as Esav, right? Owning that part of himself that is not his forte, but he's going to do things differently now as the patriarch. Exactly to your point, that he has to integrate that side of himself and not be the trickster and the supplanter anymore, but be direct and wrestle and struggle and be the patriarch legitimately.
Which is why he needs a blessing.
That's why he needs a blessing. Exactly. All right, Mehmet.
I'm fascinated by the limping part. So I understand we survived and we thrived by limping. May I talk a bit current politics?
What? Current? What does this have to do with current stuff, Mehmet?
I think for the very first time, or one of the very first times in our history, the era after World War II, after the Holocaust, was a time when we said, no, we're not going to be limping all the time anymore. So we refused that. And we built Israel, and we're proud of that. But I think something more dramatic happened after October 7th. This is when we really said we refuse to be limping. But then things got a bit uneasy with the rest of the world. So I think the balance between acknowledging that we are a limping nation and fully refusing it and acting accordingly, in contrary to the rest of our history, there is a fine balance. That's where things get difficult.
Look at my beautiful commentators here. Look at my gorgeous, brilliant, insightful commentators here.
Well, thanks to you. I mean, I wouldn't have thought about that.
All right. Look, Mehmet. Look. I'm going to prove it to you. Watch this. I got to find it. Here. Look. You just talked about Cass. Look. To endure something of the contrary character of the world without losing heart, to stay close, to strive and struggle against adversity. This is the virtue most needful for the successful transmission of God's new way, a way that will be demanding of its adherents and unpopular, to say the least, with the rest of the world. You just hit it exactly what he's saying, right? To be an unpopular people with the rest of the world, which is what we've experienced in a whole new level since October 7th, which we thought we were past, just like you said, without losing heart, staying close and striving and struggling anyway, that's who we're going to have to be in the world, because that's our situation. And in that sense, it hasn't changed in, 3,000 years. This is the beginning of it, is what Cass is saying. This is the beginning. What is the beginning? We eat differently. We don't eat the thigh. He's saying this is the beginning of peoplehood, right? Like, this practice that we do together is going to separate us from other peoples. We're not going to be able to eat with the neighbors, and people are not going to like that we are separate and that we're different and that we don't assimilate. And it remains true 3,000 years. And we're going to have to figure out how to struggle and limp, and whatever, and strive and hang in there anyway. Because that's who we are. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Oh, I'm so proud of my students. All right, Bert.
I want to, comment this from a completely different aspect, inspired in part by some teachings by Rabbi Reuben.
Okay.
And that is what is Yaakov doing? He's wrestling with a God that he's not quite sure what that God is. Mm-hmm. And our name. And that the Jewish people are God wrestlers. What we do is wrestle with what is God, is there God, who is God, who isn't God, what can God do, what can't God do. And so we are not the people who receive the truth, capital T, but we are people who wrestle, and in that wrestling we build Torah.
Yes. So I don't think that's so different from what we're saying. I think that's exactly right. On all levels, we wrestle. We struggle with the world. We struggle with our identity. We struggle within ourselves as a people. We struggle with God. What is God? We struggle with the God concept. We struggle with what that means, right? 100%. All of it. I think that's what makes it so powerful. This name, Yisrael, so powerful, is that all of it is true. We don't even get what that means from the text, to your point about truth, capital T. Mm-hmm. We don't get an explanation of this name change other than you've striven with divine beings and humans and prevailed. What the heck does that mean? That's not an answer, really. But it is, right? So I think that answer encompasses all of the things we've just said. And I think it's purposeful that it's not more limited, right? That it's supposed to be a big answer about what we wrestle with as a people. That's who we are, wrestlers. That's who we are. That's how we self-identify, right? Laura?
It makes me think about not taking it out of the context of just who are we as a people, but just what are the qualities that I can try to hang on to in this moment in time of there's so much struggle. So in that regard, I think it's just helpful as a reminder that like, this is how it is. This is what you've got to go through, just to keep persevering in whatever different struggles we have, whether you are an immigrant lawyer, and it is not an easy time to be one.
An immigration attorney, let's just say.
Let's just say hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
It's tough to endure those struggles. So it's helpful in that regard.
And I think so what I hear you saying, which I agree with, I think what you're saying is it's both prescriptive and descriptive, right? It's both, right. This is how it is. And don't forget, people, Israel, the way you're going to make it in the world is to hang on no matter how hard it gets. And it's going to get hard. And you are going to have to remember that you are wrestlers. You can do this. You've got to do this. That's who you are.
Right. That's correct.
I think that's beautiful. It's both prescriptive and descriptive. Beautiful. Bert?
I had wanted to add, I'm taking a course in Jewish theology, and at the moment we're studying Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, who is one of the leading lights of modern Orthodoxy.
Right.
A religious existentialist who basically believed that whole thing, we're born alone, we die alone, the aloneness of every human being as being our existential situation. And in that situation, we struggle for meaning. And so Yaakov's aloneness kind of relates to that he was alone, and this aloneness, or as it says in Pirkei Avot, we begin as a putrid drop and we end as dust. Okay. Kind of depressing. But at the same time, no, life is tough. We are born alone and we die alone, and that's the way it is.
Well, and I think that is what I saw this time that I've never seen before. Exactly what you're saying, that Soloveitchik is pointing out that that's not a great thing. It's just the truth, right? It's just how it is. But it's a painful truth. It's a painful thing. Adam is levad, and that's the only thing that's not tov in paradise, right? This world is a paradise. And the thing that's lo tov about our existence, is that we are alone, ultimately. And we have to be alone to really come to the truth of who we are. Yeah, in other words, Yaakov has to be alone at the Yavok if he's going to have a serious encounter with reality, capital R, right? And if he's going to really have something that changes him happen, ultimately, we all do that alone. It's so profound. It's so beautiful. Oh, I love it. Okay, Lisa, then Alex.
I think to follow up on what Mehmet was saying, October 7th really is a split to me of Jews really being at odds with the world because they absolutely rejected this notion of being victims and really actively going out and fighting as every nation would. We've never been in the position of being like other nations. Even in the 5 or 6 wars that Israel fought, there was something almost biblical about that. This was a more normalized form of vengeance, really, just out and out vengeance. We're going to, avenge the people that were hurt. We're going to get back our captives, which is very biblical. But I think on some level, this is raising the question, why is the world going so crazy over Israel when all these horrible other things are happening in the world? But it is so against type for Jews to be behaving like this, and frankly, behaving badly. when we think about the Netanyahu government, we may not agree with what the Netanyahu government chose to do, but the fact that that is what Israel's chosen to do is so against type. It's I think this is what's driving the world crazy about us, and it is out of character for us, and therefore uncomfortable for us too.
Okay, thank you. Lots there. I'll just be brief and say yes and yes. I'm not sure, and this is, and I'm being honest, not just reacting to what you're saying. I've been thinking about this a lot. I just had an argument with somebody about this, like a real argument, like somebody I care about, and I was like, listen, honey. And the argument went something like this. We weren't always powerless, but we developed a certain culture and a certain way of being in the world when we were Sherit Yisrael, the remnant of Israel. When we were oppressed, a minority, living among other nations who had power, we never did anywhere in 2,000 years. We became a certain kind of culture and people. And I'm being completely honest right now and open and vulnerable with y'all and whoever's going to listen to this, 300,000 people, that I have had to wonder, what does it mean now that we have power? What am I trying to say? I don't think it just shocked the world that it went against type. I think a lot of us are horrified by looking at the right-wing, crazy settler violence. It's like, this is Jewish? Like, wait, right? So, I mean, it's, and I don't think it's just internalized anti-Semitism, like that we're supposed to be, because the person I was arguing with said, well, yeah, the world wants us to be without power again. And I'm like, no. I'm not talking about the rest of the world. I'm talking about us, how we see ourselves, how we see our tradition, how we see our ethics, values, morals. Like, what?
Correct.
Have they been like, what happens when we have power? I'm not so sure we're any different from anybody the flip else, in that it corrupts on some level. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm saying yes, to both the point that, oh, sure, when the Jews do it, when Israel does it, it gets condemned in a way that's not being condemned in Sudan or Congo, right? That the world isn't flipping out about Ukraine. Lahavdil, the opposite. Russia invaded Ukraine and kills all these innocent people and is still there, taking their territory, murdering their people, and the world does not go bananas. So yes, when the Israel does it, whoops, here goes the world, right? And it's going to go on and on and on and on. And now it's not just Israel, it's Jews, right? People in the, so yes, and I think this is the Esav Yaakov tension too. And when we have power and someone crosses us, I'm not proud of the ways that it's played out entirely, right? And when I look at, elements of the Netanyahu government and using Judaism and Jewish language and Jewish texts and Jewish philosophy about the world to defend that behavior, I'm horrified.
Yeah, but if we go back to our own text, we did to the Philistines. If we get really biblical about it, we've done this before.
Yes, that's my point.
Text of ours. So
that's my point. Yes, exactly.
And they're using it to justify it.
And that tension is very real, and it's tearing the people Israel apart. By the way, right? I'm hoping that's not permanent, right? But there is a rift that I'm not sure how we're going to heal. This is why one of the reasons we left the Reconstructionist movement. Right? That rift is real. That if you're going to leave behind half of the Jewish people because you're anti-Zionist, that's a real rift that I'm not sure what we do with that and where we go with that as a people. Okay, I've been talking a lot. Alex?
We could talk about this for years.
Well,
I'm going to try to be brief. In response to everything you said, yes, the hypocrisy is real. In response to Lisa, I would say for me, yes, October 7th was certainly eye-opening, but all of this has been there. And I think that we were living at a time, I was living at a time where I just didn't have something to shine as much light on the anti-Semitism that has always been there for years and years. as far as going back to this wrestling, I know. There was so much that happened since I raised my hands that I wanted to respond to. But as far as the, being born alone and dying alone, I don't feel as if I was born alone. I mean, I was connected to my mother, the cord, all of that, surrounded by people. And the dying alone, I think there's some contradiction there, because I think it's the lens in which you see that death, because ultimately we could be returning back to oneness. And so is that really a journey of being alone? So I don't where was that said? Is that said in the Torah?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Jacob was left alone.
Maybe that's a more modern lens in
Yes.
which I see, because, and then it's also, but it does go back to Torah, because aren't we all one anyway? So
Right,
just
so-
like the push and pull of that.
All right. So, okay. That's big. That's really
So
big.
that's
So-
just what I was
I know
thinking
we could spend
about.
hours. Yes, we could,
Yes.
and we will. We'll spend the rest of our lives doing this, which I love. May they be long and healthy ones. But I think, Alex, I wanna separate the idea that alone means bad.
Precisely the lens in which
So
we see.
I don't think alone means bad. I think alone means alone, and I think oftentimes there is a loneliness that goes with our deepest awareness of being an individual that is just part of the human thing. And then when we return to oneness, capital O, on the other side of our human death, we're still gone as an individual human, right? Like there was an alone experience.
So we think.
Well, no, it's true. Our body is gone. Our individual self is gone. I'm hoping that means we return to source, right? But Amy Bernstein's gone. As a wave in the ocean, that wave is gone. It crashed on the shore and it's gone. I'm not saying that's bad. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm saying it's different than being ocean again, and still is different from being a wave. The water's doing something different. It doesn't mean better or worse, but it's different.
I would also
the quality of being a human soul in a skin is an experience of individuation and aloneness that is not the same as where we come from and where we're going back to. I guess that's what I say. That it doesn't mean bad. It just means different. The wave is still ocean. The wave doesn't stop being ocean as it does its wave thing, but it does a wave thing that's different from just being ocean. Does that make sense?
100%. I would also say that the idea of being lonely or being alone, loneliness versus being alone, and we can even be lonely amongst a group of people, and the wrestling with all of that as Jews and beyond. I mean, this is the human condition, whether you're Jewish or not. This no matter what tribe you're from, right? I mean,
I think that is a reading of this text that I didn't appreciate. I'm trying to say. Yes, I think that's here, and I never saw it before. I mean, I knew he was alone, and that has its own thing. He sends them over. He goes back alone. He's purposefully alone, but I don't know. It wasn't until I put it together with Cass pointing out Adam was alone, right? That it's like, oh, okay, there's a whole nother layer. And Laura, to your point in the chat, I think the difference between me being critical of our government and the painful part of doing that about Israel is not the politics and even the values. It's the Judaizing of things that I find abhorrent. In other words, I don't have a problem criticizing Netanyahu. That's not what's painful. Or his government. That's not painful for me. What's painful for me is to watch them use my tradition that for 2,000 years was about us being givers of charity and tzedakah and chesed and rachamim and gemilut chasadim and keeping Shabbos and taking care of the poor and taking care of each other and standing up for the underdog and loving the stranger, and like watching that be turned into a weapon. That is exceedingly painful for me. And in that sense, I feel a great deal of pain when I watch people in this country use America's values and ethics that way as well. that part of criticizing our government in the States is also very painful for me. When they take the things that America, I believe, was founded on, that are why I'm a deep patriot and grateful for this country, when they use those things to be violent ways of weaponizing them,
Twisting
that's painful. It's the same kind of pain I feel when I watch our beautiful tradition. And our country's only 250 years old. We had 2,000 years of using our tradition to sustain us in times where we were often suffering and allied ourselves with other suffering peoples. That's how we saw ourselves. And the remnant of Israel. And I think that's what is watching 2,000 years of that kind of interpretation of our identity be weaponized is Mehmet.
So the wrestling continues.
Mehmet brings us to the end of our shiur, the end of our session, with a brilliant bow that he just tied on it, which is, and so we continue to wrestle.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.